And welcome back to Drum Electric. If you haven't seen it yet, this whole MainStage backing track rig thing, make sure to check out part 1 of this little adventure up here. This video is part 2, where in part 1 we built a little mono backing track rig with click going in the left channel and the backing track going in the right channel, but now we're looking full on stereo click, stereo tracks and multiple outputs with custom mixes. That's what I'm talking about. This means that we can get that beautiful stereo buttery goodness, oh yeah. And if you have multiple band members, that you can actually send them the click and them the backing track in a beautiful stereo image of glory. So basically, long story short, we're building a rig that means our guitarist can't complain at us for being too fast on that one track when it was definitely them the entire time. You know who I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, let's get behind the kit. Let's build this rig. Alrighty, we're behind the kit, it's time to make some magic. As I said at the top of this video, make sure to check out part 1 just for reference for everything we're using. Now, the thing I'm using on my screen is just literally one of the templates on MainStage. I didn't build this custom, you of course can, but if you want reference to where I got this from, I believe this is the 8-track playback template that they have on MainStage, or something similar. Now, before we head straight into MainStage, there is a thing that I should point out. Now, we're using a stereo rig, so we're sending different outputs to different places. I'm using the Focusrite 18i20, which basically means I have loads of inputs and loads of different outputs to play with. In order to do this, you'll need a similar thing. You don't have to use the 18i20, that's just what I'm using, but you will need something that has multiple outputs to send different things to. Otherwise, you won't be able to have a stereo click, a stereo output, and then multiple other ones for other people. So that may be something you want to look into before diving into all of this good fun stuff. As well as this, you'll also need the individual stems for your songs. Now, if you're not sure what a stem is, it's literally the individual audio file for each instrument. So for example, if I had drums, bass, guitar, I'll have 3 tracks. I'll have drums, bass, guitar. This can extend all the way out to I have the bass drum audio, I have the snare drum audio, I have the hi-hat, stuff like that. So rather than having one big track that plays everything, you have individual tracks per individual instrument. Now you'll need these so you have access to all of the nitty-gritty, all of the stuff, so you can send one track to bass, one track to guitar, stuff like that. But we'll get to that in a second. So, into MainStage we go. Now if you take a look at my screen, I've got the previous project open. This is what we looked at in part 1. So we're going to be basing it off of this. Now we just used a mono rig for this, so click comes out left, backing track comes out right. You send those individually to your sound engineer, it's a good time. But now we want to duplicate that and start going into it. So I'm just going to head into my patch list on the left here. I'm just going to duplicate exactly the same thing with Command D. There we go. And I'm just going to rename it stereo rig. Oh, I spelt it right. Yes. We've got our stereo rig. Now we want to start building out all the inputs and outputs. So this is where it gets a little bit fancy. So with the Focusrite, I have the Focusrite control. So I can control all the inputs and outputs, where they go, what they listen to, stuff like that. If I go to that now, it looks a little something like this. So from here, you can see where all my main monitor outs, where things are coming from, where things are going. Now, with this, you want to set it so all of your line outs are going to the correct places. If you've got a mono rig, you'll want to just hit this stereo button so it's all in mono, so that you get the individual line 3 out, line 4 out, stuff like that. I'm using a stereo rig, so lines 3 and 4 is going to go to my stereo one. So I just want to make sure that the playback is 3 and 4, which it is. Same with 5 and 6, the playback is at 5 and 6. Lines 7 and 8, which is the headphone, I want to make sure is lines 7 and 8, and so on. And you want to do this for all of the outputs you're playing with to make sure everything's going in the right place. Now, why you want to do that is because in MainStage, you're going to be sending your auxes to those tracks. So for me, aux 9 is going to be going to line output 3 and 4, and that's going to be that person's rig. And so on for aux 10 is going to be output 5 and 6, and so on and so on. Do you see where I'm going with this? We're starting to send each individual track to a different output so we can start messing with it. So make sure you've got all of that set up, because then in MainStage, what we want to do is we want to grab our big mixer here, and you'll see all of the auxes if you scroll across to the right. They're all outputted to the main output. So what you want to do is just 2-finger tap or right click if you've got a mouse. Make sure that output is going to the relevant output. So like I said, aux 9 is 3 and 4, aux 10 is 5 and 6, and then aux 11 will be 7 and 8. Perfect. Okay, and you'll obviously do this for as many outputs as you want. I'm just going to stick with the 3 just for demo purposes. And finally, you'll notice that all of the channels are going out to main. Now, you won't want your click track going out to the main output because that's the one you'll be sending to your front of house. So all you have to do, I'm going to track 1 will be my click, for example. Right click on that button and then no output. So this won't output anywhere unless you send it to it, which we'll get to in a second. You'll see how all of this works. But just make sure all of that's configured in the right place because otherwise you'll get some routing issues and things like that. Routing is always the most fun part of backing track rigs. Okay, we've set all of that up, which is good. We've got our routing done, which is always fun. Now we actually want to start putting our stems into our rig. So I'm going to go track 1. I'm just going to go up to the playback button up here. This little file is going to come up. This is the old track I had. This is the mono track, so we don't like this anymore. Just ignore this. I want to go up to File at the top here. I want to click in there, and then I want to find my stems. I'll put them in downloads. Cool. So I want to have click. Open. There we go, clicks in there. Now make sure the sync is off, so all of your stems sync with each other. Just gonna hit play, works a treat. Now you'll notice that you probably won't hear anything, and that's because we have taken off the click output. So that click is going nowhere, but you can see it's all working in MainStage, the signals are coming through, but trust me, just stick with me for a minute. Okay, so track 2, I'm gonna have bass, just because you can do this in whichever order you like. It's totally customizable. I'll hit play, make sure that works. You can see the clicks going, and then perfect, we have a bass track. Okay, and then you just do this for all of your instruments. So I'm just gonna do this quick. I'm gonna have drums next, drums, cool, and then on 4 instruments. Lovely. Now, we've got all of our tracks in there. We don't want these all to be named this. So I'm just down here. I'm just going to go click. Oh, that's not got a capital C. We've got to have capitals here. We're not monsters, you know. Got to have our capital letters. There we go. Bass, drums, inst. Because instruments with a full stop. Okay. So you'll notice that up on our actual rig, those are still just the track names. Now, this is one of those little fun quirks of MainStage, where you'll have to go to the Layout tab over in your top left, click on the track, and then rename it here. So that was click, then I've got bass, drums, inst. There we go. Head back to edit. Perfect, and they're all renamed. So you'll want to do this for all of the stems that you've got, all of the stems that you've got in there that you want to rename, things like that. I've only got the 4 for ease, but if you've got all 8, then this can take a minute. This does take some prepping time. Okay, so all of the stems are in there. I'm now going to hit play and see if they all work together. Hopefully they will. There goes the click. Yeah. Okay, that all works, they're all synced up, it's a great time. So, now's the fun bit where we start sending it out to our individual channels. So I'm gonna go, I'll start with the first one. This is gonna be me, I'm the drummer on this, even though there's a drum track on there, but we'll ignore that for now. I'm aux 9, the drum bus, the drum headphone mix is aux 9. So, just gonna rename that D mix. Perfect. 10, I'll put bass mix, so B mix. And then 11, I'll put G mix for guitar. Oh, I spelled that horrendously. G mix for guitar. Okay, so now you'll see D, B, G. They're all named up there so you can see all of the individual tracks. So now, like I said, it's the very fun bit. So we've got our 4 stems. Again, you could have 8, but we've got 4. And I'm the drummer, so what I want is I want click, bass, and instruments. So all I'm going to do is turn up those individual channels on the D. So, if I want click, I'll just hit play so I can get the track going. I'm going to turn that up however loud I want it. And we've got click. So, like I said before, where the click track isn't coming out of the main, it's still an audio track. So it's just now you're in control of where exactly you want to send it to. So if I want that at unity or 0, I'm just going to go hold the option and click on that fader. There we go. So I've got click. Now I want bass, so I'm just going to turn that up. About there, that'll do. I don't want drums, I want some instruments. Perfect. And if I did want drums in there as just like a background thing, they're not playing right now, which is helpful. There we go. So I can have them in there, I can have them as loud or as quiet as I want to. I have full control. Okay, so that's the drummers mix. Obviously, you can change that as you wish. The other thing to note as well, that this is pre-fader. So anything that you change on the faders on your main mix here, you could turn that up and down. They will not adjust on your in-ears. So that mixer is for front of house. So if they're like, hey, I need more drums or I need more bass, you can turn them up and down accordingly. They will not change for your in-ears, which is always really good. So we've got our drummers mix. Let's go over to the bass mix now. So I'm going to hit play again. You'll hear nothing. There we go, the click's going to be here, nothing. The bass player, let's say he wants click, drums, and instruments. All right, so here's click. There you go. There's some drums. And obviously the instruments are turned up, so we'll wait until they come in. And if they want some bass, we can just turn that up as well for reference. Quite loud, or you can have it quiet. So there's our bass players mix. And finally, for our guitar person, our next player, we'll just quickly whack through that. So they want everything, basically. So they want the full mix. So just gonna hit play. Here's some click, guitar, bass, bass, drums, instruments. All right. So with this as well, if they're like, actually, can you turn the click down? There you go. All right. And if they're like, actually, I don't want any click at all, like a weirdo, no click. I'm like, nah, put a little bit in. You can hear it in there a little bit. Bit more. Like, I don't want any drums. I don't want any instruments either. They just want that, like a weirdo. So that's the general idea of it. You now can do that with however many outputs you have, however many you want to control, and however many instruments you have. And this is all stereo. So each person will get a stereo feed of the backing track. You heard exactly what their mix will sound like, and you can see how really easily adjustable it is by just sending it through the auxes. And this is where MainStage starts to become a really, really powerful program. Now, I should also point out as well is that if you come into here and your backing tracks don't sync up, so you hit that play button and one of them starts 2 seconds later than the other one and stuff like that, there are a couple of ways to go around this. Now, how I check my stems is I open an empty Logic project, I put all of my audio in there, make sure they will line up, hit play, and if they are aligned in there, then all is great. If they're not aligned in Logic, that means I go back to the original file and make sure everything is in the right place and all of the bouncing settings are the same. So that means it's a bouncing problem, which is nice and easy to fix. Now, if they all do match up in Logic and they don't match up in MainStage, then you want to look out for that sync button to make sure that sync button isn't on. They've also got stuff like you may have accidentally put a marker in there somewhere, so one of them starting from marker 2, which is like halfway through, things like that. And you want to check that in the playback rig, in the playback settings, to make sure they're all exactly the same. As you can tell with all of this, it does take a little bit of time to set up. It's a little bit fiddly and stuff like that, but once it's set, that's it. You just hit save and it's all ready for gig on gig on gig. That also means that when you do one gig, they're all set in the right place. You do another gig, it's going to be exactly the same, which is perfect when you've got in-ears and monitoring and things like that. But like I said before, it's super easy to set up. Once you're a bit more familiar with MainStage and how it works and how the clicking dragging thing works and this template, you can actually do a lot of stuff with it. Now, this is obviously a template rig. You can completely customize it. If you want to, you can add a drum pad, triggers, different things. You can even add the audio inputs. So if you want to run a whole in-ear rig from this, as well as backing tracks, you absolutely can. And then obviously, the more songs you have, the more what you put in there. So just hit Command D for your next song and do that for the whole set. Yes, that takes time, but the more time and effort you put into something, the better it can be. But once it's there, it's set, it's ready to go. You can do a lot of custom things with it, and it's really good. And that is that. We now have our beautiful, hefty stereo rig that we can send tracks out multiple outputs. We can send a click to one person and nod to the other, and everyone can have a stereo backing track, and it just sounds great. This is a personal favourite of mine, and I will always try and make this sort of the backing track rig, because this means that front of house can have a stereo rig. Every band member that wants it can have click and backing track, and it's not just on the drummer to have that click. And you can then also put in different vocal cues. So if you don't want to have the drummer going 1, 2, 3, 4, you can actually have the click do that, and everyone magically comes in at the same time somehow. It's really, really fun, and you can actually start building some really powerful gigs, and as a band just become a really tight little unit, which is what we all want. As always, if you have comments or questions about any of this, please chuck them in the comments down below. I'll try and help out wherever I can. As always, please hit that like button and subscribe for all of our shiny new videos, and I will see you in the next one.